In rent, prices are once again surging up more than 10% over this time last year.
We found that everything was close to the same price, so we just kind of kept looking until we found something nice and then went there because you can get something a lot worse for a very similar price, so that was interesting.
California is currently navigating what economists describe as the least affordable housing cycle in over 4 decades, and it is unfolding within the most productive state economy in the United States. In the last few years, the median price for a single-family home in the state has climbed toward $900,000. That is roughly double the national average. Over 150,000 residents have moved out of the state in a single year, seeking lower costs elsewhere. Whole communities have seen their middle class displaced, and the pricing pressure has not dropped. But here's the detail that tells the real story. Last summer, potential buyers waiting for an open house in San Jose looked at a 1,000-square-foot bungalow listed at $1.2 million. People tried to outbid each other with all-cash offers before even stepping inside. Within 48 hours, the property disappeared from the market, sold for $400,000 over the asking price. The footage of lines snaking around suburban blocks went viral, viewed millions of times. And the terrifying part is not the price tag. It is the fact that just 2 weeks earlier in that same neighborhood, a family that had lived there for 30 years finally packed their car and left for Texas because they could no longer afford the property taxes and insurance. To understand how California arrived at this moment, you have to watch the crisis accelerate. In early 2020, state housing authorities issued a report declaring inventory had entered a critical phase. Demand had been building for years, with projections suggesting the state needed to build 180,000 new units annually just to keep pace. By 2022, data centers near coastal hubs recorded a staggering drop in available listings, down nearly 40% in just 24 hours of market activity. In late 2023, the Regional Housing Board raised the Vulnerability Index to its highest level, officially classified as a state of emergency. Several municipalities shut down new luxury developments to prioritize density. The entire metropolitan area of San Francisco saw its office-to-residential conversion plans stalled for the first time in a generation. In smaller towns like Tahoe, authorities ordered local workers to seek housing in neighboring states because local rents had exceeded $4,000 a month. No one was allowed to ignore the math anymore. And then it got worse. A few months ago, a 44-year-old service worker from Los Angeles was looking for an apartment near Santa Monica when the rental market above him essentially collapsed under its own weight. He was facing a 50% rent increase. In the days before he was forced to vacate, he looked at his options and realized there were none. He survived the transition by moving into his vehicle. But that same month, thousands of others in the Inland Empire did not find a safety net. Many were elderly. Others were young families. All were squeezed by a market that had been at a level 5 crisis, the maximum on the affordability scale, for the better part of a year. Here is the problem that is not making headlines. The California housing market does not sit on a foundation of simple supply and demand. The state is ringed by 4 of the most restrictive regulatory frameworks in the country: the California Environmental Quality Act, Proposition 13, local discretionary permitting, and mandatory single-family zoning. When economic winds hit these regulations, they transport enormous volumes of capital into existing assets and deposit it on protected neighborhoods, creating what analysts call price slabs. These slabs are the loaded chambers of the economy. They sit on top of older, weaker layers of housing stock that formed decades earlier, layers of fragile, rent-controlled units that can fracture across entire zip codes when disturbed. Economic spokespeople for the state have said that the core problem is persistent weak layers in the housing supply, often covered by new high-end developments or temporary subsidies. The dangerous points are many and difficult to identify, even for a policy expert. A single interest rate hike can be enough to trigger a catastrophic release of foreclosures. But that was only half the problem. As the state economy grew, tens of thousands of high-income workers flooded the coastal regions during the worst supply conditions in years. Analysts warned that this influx has attracted equity seekers eager to take advantage of rising values, and that, as a result, the number of priced-out residents has increased proportionally. Two forces were tightening around the state at the same time. The market was becoming more expensive, and the market was becoming more crowded. On a Tuesday morning last month, the collision arrived. A group of teachers in a local school district, all experienced professionals, looked at the listings in a nearby suburb. It is one of the most popular areas for young families, and it was rated at a level 4 for unreachability. Eyewitnesses at the local planning commission saw the moments before the project was rejected. A proposal for affordable units was found incompatible with the neighborhood. A second project died in the courts despite meeting all environmental standards. A third was buried under 40 months of litigation before being abandoned. The market did not care. And this is where it gets worse. The price increases did not stop after the exodus began. They accelerated. In the middle of the month, a surge in corporate buying buried the prospects for first-time buyers in the Central Valley. Neighborhoods were cut off from local ownership. In early 2025, a sudden shift in insurance premiums derailed the plans of thousands of homeowners. The insurance corridor, a critical component of alpine and coastal ownership, was shut down as major carriers pulled out of the state. Roughly 500 residents had come to a town hall meeting at the foot of the Sierras for a discussion on housing. In the early afternoon, a massive hike in utility and tax costs buried the only path to staying in their homes. Local agencies began shuttling residents to temporary assistance centers. The total reached hundreds of people displaced from a single county. Some who could not find a place to stay that night slept in shelters. 6 dead-end projects, 500 displaced, a record number of residents leaving in a single window earlier this year. Price growth exceeding 10% in some inland counties, and approximately 150,000 departures across the state this cycle, against an annual average that used to be much lower, and the fiscal year is only half over. The official state housing bulletin published today rates the market danger at level 4. The tendency is listed in one word: constant. More price volatility is forecast over the next quarter. And analysts have identified another threat moving in. A midweek trend in the bond market could send higher rates into those same weak layers, triggering a new type of release: wet inventory avalanches that carry more debt and travel farther into the suburban sprawl. The state attorney general is still investigating whether the recent price spikes were triggered by artificial intelligence algorithms or released naturally by market forces. The boundaries of the unaffordable zones could still shift. And the paradox that keeps housing professionals awake at night is approaching. When the interest rates eventually drop from 6% to 4%, the period statistically responsible for the most market volatility, buyers will flood back onto the market they believe is safe. The housing pack will still be hiding its weakest layers beneath a surface that looks stable. How many more neighborhoods sit at the end of a single economic road that one price surge can erase? How do you tell families airlifted from their long-term homes that the market beneath them has not finished moving? And if thousands have already left this year and the cycle is only half over, who is counting the ones that have not fallen yet? In California, they have managed to find temporary shelter for most people this time. The question no one can answer is whether the economy is finished with them.